welcome everybody to this Zoom call about Get Out the Vote and creating dynamic messages. I am Joan Patterson. I'm with the Coalition of Refuge Friends and Advocates, otherwise known as CORFA. Hey, and folks, while I am doing the short intro, would you please put in the chat your name and what refuge you're associated with? That would be a big help. I'd love to see who's participating. We are very excited about this webinar. I will tell you that our team, Matthew and Joan Van Gorp and Polly, have been, and everyone else has been putting a lot of work into this. And so we're supercharged about it. We're also very excited that, hey, last week it was announced that the Refuge system has its 572nd unit in the Willamette Valley. It's between Eugene and Salem, an area that I always loved driving through. It's 600 acres of oak savanna and prairie habitat, which has really disappeared in that valley. And fortunately, it's going to help protect 5 endangered species and 2 candidate species. What's really great about it, too, it's a partnership between Fish and Wildlife Service, the tribal nations, and private landowners. Most of this land is going to be within easements. So just wanted to share that with you. And like I say, we're very excited about it. And we're very excited about the partnership that we have here. This webinar is brought to you by CORFA, the Refuge Association. They provide us with so much support and input. For a change, too, we have Defenders of Wildlife. Desiree Sorensen Groves is on from Defenders. And then also, as our resident expert on all things Fish and Wildlife Service, Mike Carlo is here to answer any questions that may come up from the Refuge perspective on what we're going to be talking about. So a few housekeeping things. If you have questions or comments, you can go ahead and put them in the chat. I will be monitoring that, and I'm sure that Eden and Cheryl will also help with that. But if you got questions, put them in the chat. There will be pauses throughout the presentation that we will, refer to those questions. Or if you have a question too, you can just go ahead and raise your hand and we will see about calling on you. We will call on you. Okay, so I want to just introduce to you Desiree Sorensen Groves, who is going to be our first speaker. Desiree is the Vice President of Land and Habitat Conservation for Defenders. So she oversees a lot of the programs that deal with refuge system lands, National Forest, BLM, actually the Department of Interior, some of their lands, and also private conservation initiatives. I hope most of you remember Desiree from her time at the Refuge Association. So I'm going to turn things over to Desiree at this point.
Thank you, Joan, and hello to all of you. I saw a lot of familiar names as you guys were putting them in the chat. I apologize. I am coming to you from a parking lot because the power was cut to my house. Contractor took out the power to our entire community. So I am at a Lowe's parking lot nearby. There you go. Fantastic. So I'm really excited to talk to you guys about this. I am very passionate about getting Americans out to vote and getting people registered to do their civic responsibility from my point of view. And it's something that 501c3s can do. And it's really important to know what you can and can't do as a nonprofit and as a 501c3. So as many of you guys know, or you should know, you can do things like this, but you cannot take positions on candidates or political parties. That's the big thing that you cannot do. So you cannot support or endorse a political candidate or a political party. So you cannot go out and say that you support one candidate over another or a political party over another. You can do a lot of things. You can educate the public about the issues that you care about, and you can certainly ask candidates, although if you're going to ask one candidate, you have to ask all of the candidates these things. The biggest piece that we're going to talk about today, when we turn it over to Matthew, is about voter registration drives, which is completely within the purview of a nonprofit and what you can do. As I said, most friends groups, if not all, I think there's a couple that are not, but almost all friends groups are 501c3 organizations. There is another nonprofit called a C4 organization. And some of you guys might be familiar with C4 arms of organizations. So like Defenders of Wildlife, we are 501c3, but we have a C4 arm. It's called the Defenders Action Fund. And then there are organizations like NRDC, Natural Resources Defense Council. They have an NRDC Action Fund. They have a C4 arm. Earth Justice Action. There's a lot of you're probably very familiar with probably the most famous of environmental organizations that do this, which is the League of Conservation Voters. They have a national organization and they have state organizations that are very, very highly involved in political action. These are C4 organizations. They can take positions on candidates and parties. They have a different status. And so the League of Conservation Voters will do things that we as 501c3 organizations will not, but they can do those things. The big thing that we want to talk about to you is that you can get people registered to vote. You can help them understand the issues. You just cannot recommend who they vote for or which political party. So we'll get into it a little bit more, but that's the bottom line. We are Americans, and we can do our civic duty, get people out to vote. It's a passion of mine, and as many of you guys would know. And I'm excited to turn it over now to Matthew to talk about some of the resources that have been created to help you do registration drive. Matthew?
Thanks, Desiree. Yeah, my name is Matthew Emmer. I'm president of the Friends of the Savannah Coastal Wildlife Refuges here in Savannah, Georgia, and I'm also on the board of CORFA. So let me go ahead and I'll share the screen and we'll get started. So I believe everyone can see this slide now. So basically, we wanted to talk a little bit about why we put this together. So I'm sure a lot of you are familiar with CORFA and their mission to provide resources to friends groups and just to help them be the best advocates for themselves and for the refuge system. So just think of this as another tool in the toolkit. CORFA in the past has sent out things like the Recess Action Kit to help you during those times. So this is just going to be one more thing that we can work together with. It's the beginning of a conversation. And we hope that we can build off of this from year to year, because we know that this is not the only election that will ever happen. There'll be an election next year and the following year. And so hopefully we can just keep this conversation going, and we can make sure that people are aware of refuges and how we can get out the vote. So let's talk a little bit about, a quick number from the Council of Nonprofits, that 81% of people that were polled say that it's appropriate for nonprofits to provide information to help people vote. So Desiree just gave you the facts of that you can do it, but we just want to kind of share a little bit more of, generally speaking, the vast majority of people are looking for this help and they say that it's appropriate. So it's a little bit more of an encouragement to do so. And the Council of Nonprofits, just really quick, is just a long-standing organization who provides tools and resources to help nonprofits in all sectors to be a little bit more effective, especially when tackling different topics. So that's a great resource for nonprofits to learn a little bit more. And it's not just about voting, but from all things that nonprofits tackle. But I guess the big one is, what does the IRS say? We want to protect our 501c3, and the IRS says voter registration and get out the vote drives would not be prohibited if conducted in a nonpartisan manner. And that's the big key. As long as you stay nonpartisan, you will be fine. And this is a direct quote from the IRS website. We'll have a direct link at the end of the presentation so that you can do a little bit more research if you want. I know it's very important. We want everyone to be comfortable with this. And it can get a little bit scary when we're talking about the IRS and our 501c3. We want to protect that C3 status, but it is legal, and they literally call out voter registration and get out the vote drives, which is what we're talking about today. So I know Desiree just kind of jumped through a few of these items, but I want to just kind of reiterate a little bit more clearly what some categories are and what the category, especially what you cannot do. But I wanted particular to pinpoint what we're talking about today, you need to insert the idea of your friends group. So as an individual, you have a lot more leeway in what you can and can't do. But as a friends group, is very specific. So when you think of this checklist, and there'll be a checklist that we send out with the kit, think about inserting the words, your friends group can promote voter registration. Your friends group can encourage people to vote, can continue the issue advocacy that you do all the time, and they can create a candidate questionnaire. And there are a few other things. Yeah, like Desiree said, the candidate questionnaire can be a little bit tricky. You have to send that out to all candidates. I'm not assuming most friends groups are going to tackle that one necessarily, but it is there. But then definitely what your friends group cannot do is endorse a candidate. It cannot make a campaign donation. It cannot rank candidates. And you cannot let, your friends group cannot let your candidates use your facilities. So there are a few other things in those categories, but just think about that. It's your friends group, what you're doing with your friends group and how you're representing your friends group when we're talking about this. And you'll find out more information on this 2-page PDF, which we're going to send out with the kit, like I said, and it's from nonprofitvote.org. And that's another group, but they focus specifically on helping nonprofits with tools and resources to help with voting and participating with democratic issues. So you'll see a lot of what we're just saying on these 2 sheets, and they'll go into a little bit more detail, but then nonprofitvote.org, a great tool and resource if you're considering doing something like this, or some of the things that we're not going to talk about. You can explore all those options for yourself. And it's a great way. They spell it out very clearly what you can and can't do, but we will make sure to send this out with our action kit. So I know everyone kind of understands that your vote equals your vote, your voice, that it's important for the issues that are, that concern you to take that into the voting booth. What we're trying to do is reframe that idea to make sure that your vote is their voice, that we're going to take these votes and we're going to speak for wildlife who cannot vote for themselves, who do not have a voice in our political system. And so that's the big kind of shift that we want to make people aware of, that when you go vote, you can also use your vote to speak for wildlife. And so as we were putting together this message with the team, some of the big key things that we wanted to make sure that we got across were that refuges are, quote, on the ballot, that wildlife depends on our collective vote, and that we do need a bold message because we have to grab attention. We have to cut through all of the things that you're going to be inundated with in the next couple of months on social media. What's going to be a bold message that stands out and gets people to stop and take a little bit more time to read our message. And so what we came up with is vote as if your wildlife depended on it. And so the idea is we're using a common idiom, as if your life depended on it, and we're changing it just slightly. We're adding the word wild into the wildlife. We're emphasizing the word wild with the color blue. I know the Fish and Wildlife Service is going big on blue with their rebrand. So we're trying to re-emphasize that we are talking about wildlife refuges. And then we thought it'd be interesting to use a flock of birds flying in the V formation to kind of outline the V in vote. But I think you'll notice that there's a little bit of a different style of a bird at the very top, kind of completing a check mark, if you will. And that is our flying check mark. So this is a new graphic that we've designed. We worked with a graphic designer to bring this to life, and then we fine-tuned it. And this is a standalone graphic that we hope that will remind people and kind of re-emphasize the idea that you have the ability to make a check, make a choice for wildlife. I think most of us will probably very quickly realize that it does pay homage to Ding Darling's Blue Goose that the service uses, but it is very different. It's a little bit more modern, a little bit more bold, and it does, we set it at the angle so it does resemble a check mark. So this is a logo that we hope that will kind of continue on into the future. But we also wanted to make sure that it was very clear of what we were doing. and we didn't want it to be a partisan issue. So what we did was we came up with a variant. And so this is the flying support checkmark. It just has a red circle behind it, clearly outlining that I support national wildlife refuges. And we hope that that will be a very visual impact and, impactful graphic that can capture people's attention while being very specific about what we're trying to support. So we're taking those graphics, and over time, we're going to develop a few products. You might see, we have some T-shirts. You might see these on tote bags, some stickers. We're also going to be working on lapel pins because we think it's important that, especially for members of Congress on the Hill, we want to put these in their hands, and so that if they'll wear them, hopefully we can, garner some more support that way and be a visual representation on the Hill for what I would say refuge friendlies, people who are actively voting for wildlife, who support the National Wildlife Refuge System, especially those members of the House that are in the Refuge Caucus. I think this is going to be a really interesting and fun way to reach those individuals. And hopefully we'll start to see this graphic kind of take a life of its own across the country, really. So these are the main graphics. And primarily what we're doing is we're pitching a social media campaign first initiative that we want people to share these graphics on their social media. We have developed some copy and have outlined a schedule. So you'll see all of this combined into what we're calling the 2024 messaging kit. And like I said, it's a complete how-to guide. So you don't have to worry if I'm not explaining this exactly precise. It's been, written out in detail how to use this, what the copy that we're suggesting to use, the digital assets to use on social media, and then a calendar with some suggested post dates. There will be different time frames leading up to the election, like the end of voter registration for most states. If your state does participate in early voting, the idea of posting around that time, and then of course leading up to November 5th. So this is the entire kit. You'll have the campaign kit, which will have the 10-page document that outlines everything, including the graphics, how to use them, the copy, some disclaimers, that kind of a thing. You'll have the 3 graphic images, and then you'll have the 2-page checklist from nonprofitvote.org to make sure that you are very well, you have all the information at your disposal to make the choices to hopefully participate, because we know that, if we share something on, say, our friends group, it's only going to gain traction probably in our local area. But if we can get friends groups across the country to join in together, hopefully we'll start to build that audience that are all seeing the same graphics, they're all hearing the same message, and our reach will be much more impactful than if we just did it alone. But I did want to point out 2 pages. They're in the kit, but we do have a full page that's our disclaimer page. And then I want to talk a little bit about how to use this page, this kit page. So with the disclaimer, as a nonprofit, as a 501c3, you are legally allowed to do what you are allowed to take part in the Get Out the Vote campaign. However, we wanted to make sure that we were running this by Fish and Wildlife Service, because I know a lot of what friends groups, their activities that they do occur on federal property and do take place at refuges. So we did talk with the staff with Fish and Wildlife Service, and they gave us a very clear-cut, this is what has to happen if you're doing something on refuge property. And so that will be the bullet points listed out in the disclaimer. It is actually not prohibited, like you can do it. They just have some suggestions on what you should be doing, especially with signage, to make sure that nothing points back to the service and that no service employees are involved with your efforts. But that's all clearly outlined. We also know that, in October, many friends groups will be participating in Walk for the Wild. And we wanted to make sure that that was also something that was potentially covered. So if you are participating in Walk for the Wild and you are on a National Wildlife Refuge, and say you had some information about a Get Out the Vote campaign or some of these graphics or a sticker or something, and you wanted to hand that out to someone, that is possible. The Fish and Wildlife Service came out and said that members of a friends group passing out stickers during the Walk for the Wild event would not be illegal, but we do recommend clear signage saying that Walk for the Wild was being held by the friends group, and that Refuge staff should not distribute anything or should refer the public. Like if anyone comes up to them, they should refer the public back to the friends group to explain anything. That really the service staff want to be completely separated from any of those contacts with the public, and that clear signage should be put out just so that there are no miscommunications. We don't want anyone to misunderstand what's taking place. So a little bit more of the fun stuff, the how to use this kit. We included some hashtags like hashtag vote for wildlife, hashtag vote wild, vote 2024. If you're using on social media and you're very familiar with that, those are some of the ones that we created and that will be shared by other people, especially the Vote 2024, the Go Vote. We wanted some very specific hashtags for ourselves, but then to join in with the general conversation about voting in 2024. We also were posting the idea of a social media challenge. So another way to involve your followers. And the idea is that we hope that you can kind of prompt them and have them respond with a photo or a message. And basically the idea would be, why do you hashtag vote for wildlife? So it's just another little way to play with that. And we hope that we can kind of just keep the conversation going with our followers. But I did want to focus on the change up of the words. So one of the pages has a complete copy form for Facebook, for Instagram, the kind of the dialogue that we feel should be shared, but we understand that that friends groups want to talk about their refuge and that there are things they want to share from their site to their followers. So we do encourage that. Take those words as a guideline, but then change them up. The short form, because we do want to make note of our hatchery friends groups. A lot of the words do revolve around wildlife refuges and the refuge system, but the short form of the copy is actually really easily adjusted to include for hatcheries. So if you see the word refuge, it may not be a complete just blanket cut and paste for hatchery, but that short form really is kind of set up for hatcheries as well. So next steps. We want you to download the kit. It'll be on the Corfa resource page on their website. We want you to review it, go through it, come up with questions. You don't have to have a question right this very second, but you'll probably have a question after you read it. Reach back out to us. You can reach out at coalitionrefugefriends@gmail.com. And we want to, if you have any questions, we want to engage with you to make sure that you're comfortable with this kit, but then to take that and then to go engage with your followers. We hope that it's easy enough. We wanted to give you all the resources, all of the assets, so that you could feel very confident in posting this on your social media pages and kind of running with this now and into the future. And I just wanted to kind of wrap it up a little bit with a great quote from Aldo Leopold: "We grieve only for what we know." That's why this is so important. If I believe the Pew Research Center had environment as like the number 14 priority on the list for voting priorities this year. That's a lot to overcome. We have to really get people interested in making that mindset shift, that if you do care about wildlife refuges, if you do like to go birding, if you like to go hiking or photography or any of those things on our wildlife refuges, that they need help legislatively. We're not going to tell people how to vote, but we do want people to do their own research, but to think about wildlife when they go into the voting poll. So a few more additional resources: boardsource.org, always a great resource, but they do have information about voting and get out the vote campaign drives. Nonprofitvote.org, like I said. And then the last one is the IRS, but it was a really long web address. So we made a tiny URL. So tinyurl.com/nonprofit-IRS. That'll take you directly to where it talks about C3s and what they can and can't do on as far as get out the vote drives. So with that being said, thanks, and go vote. So I think we'll open up the floor if there are any questions.
Yep, Matthew, could you show the kit and also some of there's a question from Richard about bumper stickers. Is it possible for you to show the kit in terms of, like, you have a t-shirt design and the stickers?
Yes, I mean, I can take it back to that slide there. Let's see. Take this back. Right, so we do have a bonfire account set up for t-shirts and tote bags. I believe it's bonfire.com/Corfa, but we will send out that link as well. So there are t-shirts that you can go, and there's a couple different options for that in a few different colors. And then we are working on stickers, especially for that square sticker with the flying birds. We will be also sending out a Google form so that if that's something that you're interested in, that you can communicate with us through that Google form. We will immediately get back to you and we'll figure out how to get, if you want to order many of them. Otherwise, we will be placing, a smaller order for Corfa, and we can distribute from there. So just reach out to us and we will make sure that you have the information.
We have a question in the chat. I think, Desiree, this one's for you. It's from Sue Hicks at Sherburne. Every year, our Friends group invite the members of Congress and the senators to the Refuge's Fall Wildlife Festival. It's a good way for them to catch up on the Refuge news and also chat with constituents. We're doing that again this year, inviting them as current members of Congress, not as candidates. Since this is an election year, though, are we obligated to invite opponent candidates from other major parties as well?
So not as long as they are participating in their official responsibility as an officer of Congress. You can invite them just as a representative or as a senator. And you would only have one senator running for re-election, obviously, at one time, but your member of Congress is running every 2 years. They have to understand that they cannot be talking about their candidacy while at your event. And I would be prepared, Sue, and I know you would be, that if they start to go off script, that you will pull the plug on their microphone or yank them off the stage physically if you have to. I'm just kidding. But they cannot talk about their election and their candidacy. They are representing their position when they are there as a senator or as a representative or a state senator or a state representative. And by the way, this did happen once with Joan when she was with the Friends of Potomac River Refuge, and the local chair of the County Board of Supervisors, this was like 2009, 2008, something like that. And he actually started talking about his campaign. And if I remember right, I think it might have been Joan or someone else, but just, calmly sort of talked to him and urged him not to do that. But you have to be careful because
Right.
it is your event. but I think that you just have to set clear expectations with them beforehand. If you really want to be careful, you could certainly invite people who are running on the other side, and there's like a sort of like an eligible, like anyone who is like eligible major parties. I would go ahead and invite pretty much anyone who was running. And I believe the Friends of Potomac at that time actually did invite other people. I'm not sure that many others came. But if they show up, you must give them an opportunity to speak.
Yeah.
So it can totally be done. And it happens, you know, every couple of years during an election year. And Friends groups have fall festivals every single October, as you should. To get, and you want to cultivate this relationship with your elected officials. So getting them out to the refuge is absolutely the most important thing that you can do. So if they're getting out to your refuge, it's so fantastic. We don't want to discourage them. We want them to have a great time, but they cannot talk about their election or the larger election. They cannot be talking about who is running for president during that time.
Cool, thanks. Well, we're talking Amy Klobuchar and Tom Emmer, so I think they know better, but I wouldn't be afraid to remind them if they actually are able to come. So thank you.
It'd be great if they could, Sue.
Oh, yeah.
And I would suggest, based on some experience I had, that remind them, because we had a member of Congress at Tualatin who wanted to do a commercial and asked the Friends to be part of that commercial. And we had to explain to him that we could not, because it would look like we are endorsing him as a candidate, you know. And the office was like, oh, we didn't know that. But
Good point. Thank you.
okay. So Mary would like to know, Matthew, if the photo with the bird, the albatross, your voice equals their voice, if that's going to be available for Friends to use.
Unfortunately, no, that we borrowed that photo from Ian Shive. It's one of his great photos. And then I just put the words over it just to kind of emphasize the point. It's not inside of our campaign kit. But I'm sure that we can have the conversation with Ian Shive about potentially using some of his photos in the future. But for now, no, I would say no.
And is Jeff still on the call? We will follow up with that, because I think Ian had said that he was agreeable to having Friends use his photos as long as he received credit for the, you know, for the photo. But we will double check on it. Okay. I'm going to open it up to questions if folks just want to raise their hand.
Joan, there's one more question in the box from Lisa. Could we not take a wildlife photo from our own locations and utilize the wording over the top?
Thanks, Cheryl.
Absolutely. So yeah, I mean, those aren't, you know, copyrighted words. I just, you know, put them together. So I think that's a great way to really emphasize this idea. We do want, you know, that's kind of taking the words and playing with it. That's kind of what we hope that you would do. We hadn't included the words "your vote equals their voice" inside the campaign, but that's definitely something that you know, obviously you're free to utilize, and that might be something that we put into 2025 into that campaign kit. So that's a good idea.
Chloe has raised the question, does anyone have ideas or plans to push Get Out the Vote? Beyond social media, are you tabling, plan to have an event, or simply share with your members and people who visit your site?
So no, that's a great question. We're not suggesting from Corfa that anyone do anything physical at their site. This was really just kind of putting the toe in the water as far as starting a Get Out the Vote campaign. But we did want to provide that information, like I said, with a disclaimer page, and then all the other information with the separate resources to make sure that if you do want to do that, that you know the rules. We're not advocating that you do that because it is a lot deeper of a commitment. But it is very possible. And like I said, that disclaimer page will explain exactly what Fish and Wildlife Service has said about doing things on refuge property. And we did not change anything. We just copy and paste, put it in there. So it really breaks down how to do that. And it's not as difficult as you might think, but we're not suggesting that for any friends group. That just a social media campaign is just an easy way with these graphics that you can use with this copy, that we can just kind of get going and get the ball rolling. And then hopefully, yes, over time, we will start to add little pieces here and there. But if you're ready to take that leap, I mean, that would be awesome.
And I'm just, Mike, anything else you would like to add with regards to how Fish and Wildlife Service sees this campaign, or any issues that friends should be aware of?
Thanks, Joan. No, Matthew did a really good job. I think the only thing that I would add to the list on the disclaimer page that he shared, and I think it was, we weren't very clear with you and Joan and Matthew when we were talking, but I think at the bottom I had noticed that it says, please contact the refuge manager prior to any activity. And that's what we call that a First Amendment expression activity on a refuge. Very few refuges have, as far as I know, designated First Amendment expression areas. And that would be an area that the refuge manager has outlined that this is an appropriate place for people to demonstrate, to hold public gatherings, that kind of thing. It says contact the manager, which is good. Probably to be a little bit clearer is that you would need to get a special use permit. And you need to apply for a permit to do any of these activities. So that simply means going to the Fish and Wildlife Service special use permit webpage, and there's a number of different permit applications you can fill out. I would just recommend that if anyone was planning on doing this physically on a refuge, to give at least 2 weeks notice would be great for us to review that. It's not always assured that the application will be approved, but you know what I'll do? I'll put something in the chat here. We have a regulation in the Code of Federal Regulations, so it's 50 CFR 2636 is our regulation on public assemblies, I think is what it's called. So there kind of outlines what the regulation is and what our refuge managers will be looking at. But for this type of activity, it seems like there should be very little conflict and cause for not approving that application. So just contact the refuge manager as early as you can with that permit application, how many people would be participating. And I think Matthew mentioned about the stickers and handing out stickers during Walk for the Wild. It would be the same kind of a thing, because that is a free speech activity in conjunction with the First Amendment. So you would need a permit for that. You would probably be, if the permit was approved, which again, if that's what you're doing is just handing out literature or flyers, you would just need to get that permit, and you would be able to do that in that First Amendment expression area, which are generally located very close to the main, if the refuge has a visitor center or a visitor contact station, the main parking lot where that's closest to, the closest entrance where most people will stop upon first entering the refuge. So it usually has high visibility. It's a safe area. They're usually flat and free from stinging insects and venomous snakes and all the things you have to worry about. But that's where they are, and it's usually a pretty simple process. We don't get very many, as far as I know. We don't track it very closely, but we don't get very many people applying for a special use permit for this type of activity. It's much more common in the Park Service and some Forest Service properties, but it's a very simple process to go through. So sorry.
Oh, well, let's see if we can increase that number by at least 200%.
When you say,
And I have to say, Mike, it's so great that you're not going to stick people in with the venomous snakes. I mean, that's wonderful. It's so good that the Fish and Wildlife Service is watching out for people.
And Holly, do you want to unmute yourself and share with folks what you're going to be doing with Get Out the Vote at CNE?
Oh, well, we've begun to educate our committees and our board. We'll be putting it in our newsletter, in September newsletter. We'll be doing the social media campaigns. I wasn't sure if we're going to apply for a special use permit for Walk for the Wild or not. And I'm a little confused about that. I'm on the committee, I should know, but since Walk for the Wild requires a friends group and a refuge to partner in order to have the Walk for the Wild, is that really just a friends activity? And does that matter? I'm just was curious about that, but we do posters and flyers up here a lot. And people always say when we do evaluations, where'd you hear about it? It's a flyer or a poster. So we'll probably be doing those around our communities, and that's what we know so far. And I'll be wearing the t-shirt everywhere I go.
Matthew, the t-shirts are available on Bonfire right now, right?
Yes, that is live and active. And Polly, yeah, I know the Walk for the Wild is kind of a joint situation, but I think that's the idea that the Fish and Wildlife Service really said that, especially for that event, if you had a little sign on the table with that graphic that they can relate that this is a Get Out the Vote campaign and it has nothing to do with the service, I think that would probably be your best bet to make sure that you're here for Walk for the Wild, but if we're talking to you about this, here's an outline of the policy that we're not suggesting that this is a connection to the service in any way.
Lisa has a question. I'd like to send the link for the kit to our friends, social media administrators. And when will it be in the resource center? And Matthew, you had sent that to me yesterday, right? So it will go up tonight in the resource center. And Mike, thank you for putting in the link to that policy or the regulation. Okay. From Mary, if someone asks us how to research who supports wildlife, can we suggest they look to see who is a member of the CARE Coalition?
So you definitely can always refer to the CARE Coalition for for what they say on the various topics. I would just suggest that you tell people to do a little bit of research. It's very easy to go find some of those organizations that Desiree mentioned, like LCV and others. I wouldn't necessarily want to say go to these certain sites because you could be perceived as pushing that site's agenda. I would just open the conversation to say there's a ton of candidates from all parties, all backgrounds that do support wildlife. The information is out there, and we just encourage you to go do that research. But I would probably refrain from pointing people in any certain direction just because you don't want to be perceived as trying to steer them towards a certain outcome. But it is very easy. As soon as you start putting search terms into Google, you'll start to find information. And there are trusted sources. I hate to kind of have to do that because they are trusted sources, but it would just be better if you didn't necessarily point them in specific directions, I would say.
Question from Carissa, is there something that we can add to our website that is helpful to the cause?
Yeah, absolutely. So these graphics, you'll have access to those 3 graphics individually, and you can use those in a variety of ways. If you wanted to put them into a newsletter, if you wanted to post them on social media to make a temporary profile picture, any kind of thing, you just post them and then have some of the dialogue there. But yeah, if you wanted to have a spot on your website that's saying that this is something that a lot of friends groups are doing and we're supporting this, I think that's completely fine for you to do. I would imagine your website doesn't exist on a Fish and Wildlife Service server, so you're fine that way. Yeah, just you can add some of the write-up. I mean, that's why the copy will be in that kit. You can feel free to use that exactly and just copy and paste into whatever you might feel comfortable doing. But yeah, that would be great. That's something that my friends group will be doing. Mainly because I control the website. So, it'll be in the newsletter, it'll be on the website, we'll be pushing out on our social media account. And this is not the end of the conversation. So, if you're following Corfa on Facebook, you've probably already seen me kind of pitch this event already. And throughout the next few weeks leading up to the campaign, I'll probably pop back in and say, hey, we're getting up close to the end of registration periods. So maybe if you drop something in your social media account about, making sure that you're registered by such and such a date, or that, if your state participates in early voting, it's, we're now in the middle of October and that should be taking place. So it's not the last of this conversation. And like I said, if you have questions along the way, I'll be happy to answer them as we get closer to November 5th.
Mike has put in the link to applying for a special permit. So just be aware that that's there. And remember that the chat will go out with the recording and everything. So you'll have access to it. And I see Desiree, you have a hand up, and then I'm going to go to Lisa.
I have a quick comment, which I just wanted to make, which I had forgotten. In case you have a ballot initiative in your state, that is something that you as a 501c3 can take a position on. So for those of you in California, there is something called Prop 4, which is about climate and water and wildlife. So we at Defenders just announced yesterday that we will be supporting Prop 4. It is something that you as a nonprofit can do. For the IRS, it falls under your lobbying guidelines. So you are perfectly within your purview to support or reject and urge people to do the same on a ballot initiative. So specifically, I know about the one in California, but there may be other ones. So just something for you guys to know about.
Okay, thank you. Lisa, can you post a link to the store for stickers and shirts? Amy, thank you so much for posting the link to Bonfire. I'm going there later on today. And what is the link to get the vote kit? We will be getting that out to you along with like the recording and the slides and everything else. It will be in that. And are there any other questions or comments?
I will piggyback really quick on Desiree's comment there that I know she threw out another scary word, which is lobbying. But we did put out an infographic not too long ago about lobbying and what you can and can't do. And that is also in the Corfo Resource Center. So if you have a little bit more questions about lobbying, you can definitely go visit the Resource Center. And it does talk a little bit about ballot initiatives as well. So that was a good point.
And I'm happy to answer questions, as is Joan. I've been a lobbyist for 20 years for 501c3, so you know it's perfectly legal. Otherwise, I wouldn't be doing it. I'd be in jail.
I'd like to see that mugshot. Okay, Polly.
I have another, I think it's a question, but it might be a frustration to share. So we have a congressman who I know is not supportive of refuges particularly, but when you look at his voting record, it shows, oh, he voted for the Fish and Wildlife Service appropriations. But I know he only did that after it was slashed and burned and et cetera. But how do I dig deeper? I know I'm supposed to just tell everybody, go, but I want to know for my own self, go do your own research. It's really hard to get the information. I mean, unless I read the Federal Register, I suppose, for the last, all the appropriations bill discussions, how would you know? Is there another, besides the League of Conservation Voters, is there anybody else?
I was trying to unmute myself. Well, I mean, LCV has got a good voter guide that is a good place to start. Obviously, a member of Congress's website is a really good place to start. The problem is, Polly, as you just pointed out, with appropriations bills in particular, it's usually an up or down vote. So, they are voting for something that means that in large times, that's a bipartisan vote. Because the vote has gone to the floor and it's an up or down vote, and you're not looking at what happened in the committee level and those kind of pieces. So it's hard to dig into. I would recommend Libby at the Refuge Association or Nathan and Christian. There's two gentlemen that work for me at Defenders who work on the budget for the Fish and Wildlife Service and other organizations. But you're right, it's hard. There are some big ones, like there could be a vote up or down on the Arctic National Wildlife Refuge that might score for an organization like LCV. But it's also, there are times, there's not a lot of like very refuge specific legislation. There's occasionally some. In fact, I was just talking to some folks in the Fish and Wildlife Service Congressional Office this morning about some bills that are specific for various refuges that could be bundled into a big package in September and then get passed in the lame duck. That is something that Joan, you don't even know, but I was going to talk to you about as this starts to come together. We may have some recommendations on the lobbying side for some of these bills. But, you know, you could always call your member of Congress or your senator and ask them where they are on certain issues. And if they voted against, say, increasing appropriations for the refuge system, why? So that you have some of those, that knowledge yourself. I mean, sometimes I just go straight to the horse's mouth and actually ask them. I mean, some members vote no because they just don't believe in federal funding and different reasons. It's totally legitimate. Everyone's got their reasons for which way they vote. But we just want to try to put more people in Congress that care about wildlife conservation and about the National Wildlife Refuge System. That's our, as all of us as C3s, that's our goal.
There's a comment from Mike Moore from the Friends of Swan Lake. Great information. Our refuge Swan Lake is in desperate need of staffing help. These tools should be a big help. Thank you, Matthew, for putting those together. Anything else? I see great info. Thanks for the new graphics and toolkit, Matthew. Very nice. Always good to hear Desiree taking take on things too. So, okay.
No, those are great comments. Thank you for the support, and yeah, we hope that it is just, again, another tool in your toolkit, and it doesn't have to be exactly the copy that we suggested. If you feel like you want to use this campaign to kind of help guide into some of the other advocacy issues that you're taking on, by all means, we can we want you to be able to use this and feel confident and have a life of its own. So, but we'll continue to work on it and fine tune it and make sure that it's even better for next year and years to come.
And before we sign off, I just would like to let you all know, first of all, want to thank everybody who's been involved in this. Matthew has done the lion's share of the work, and Polly Shepard's been involved, and Joan Van Gort from the Friends of Neil Smith. And I want to thank Mike and the visitor services team at the refuge system. When we first proposed this, we were just figuring they would tell us, no, you can't do that. And we have been so surprised and delighted. And yes, this is a free speech issue and we can do it. And I thank Desiree too for being a part of this and answering all the questions. The next webinar that we're going to have will be on September 18th. And it is one that is going to focus in on nature stores. Tom Worthington from Region 3 is working on this, and it's going to be like online stores, ordering, panel discussion about nature stores. And the other thing I just want to mention, September 18th is a busy day. The Refuge Association's award dinner will be that night. And Eden, will friends be able to reach that via some sort of link?
Yeah, it's going to be up on our Wildlife Refuge Awards webpage pretty soon here. We'll have a email go out about the live stream and everything as well pretty shortly. So we hope you can tune in for that.
And hopefully everybody will order their Get Out the Vote t-shirts for that event and be wearing them that evening. Okay. Well, if there is nothing else, I want to thank everyone for participating. You guys have great input. We all appreciate it.
Oh, Joan, did you want to tell them about the survey that'll pop up after?
Oh, yes. Thank you, Eden. I've been forgetting that. So there is going to be a feedback survey. We would just really like to get some information from you. It is a total of 5 questions. It should take less than a minute to answer. It is basically just fill in the blank, multiple choice, and there is one fill in the blank. So we really would appreciate your input. We will also give the link to the survey on our website, and it will be in the email that goes to you. Okay, thanks, Eden. All right. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.